Alright, so for this video, we're going to be doing Vladislava. She is a Russian bodybuilder and she literally became famous on YouTube for her physique. So let's see how attractive she is. Her overall facial rating is a 7.6. How rare is that? That is 1 in 1,500. The percentile of people is the top 0.06%. Her side facial score, so these are her harmony scores, is a 46%. Her front facial score is an 88%. Her total facial harmony score is a 71%. Her facial dimorphism, so how feminized is her face, is a 7.5. Her body fat factors is a 7.5. And her miscellaneous features is a 9.5. And then we got the tier list to the right side. Tier 1 is ideal, Tier 2 near ideal, Tier 3 normal, Tier 4 slight flaw, Tier 5 flaw, Tier 6 huge flaw, and Tier 7 breaks harmony. Now these are the overall facial assessment breakdown, the things that I feel like are the biggest flaws in her face. So her front profile has minimal amounts of flaws overall. But in the side facial assessment, the mandible, which is the jaw, is not protrusive enough for her face. This can be assessed with the measurement from the recession relative to the Frankfurt plane. The chin is another factor into why her jaw is recessed. Not enough lower chin protrusion to make an aesthetic lower third. So she does have a recessed jaw, and her chin is one of the factors why she has a recessed jaw, because her chin is not protrusive enough and her mandible is not protrusive enough as well. These are the rarity scores of different celebrities so you can compare. Now these are for facial dimorphism. So this is how I rate facial dimorphism so y'all can have an insight. So her nasolabial angle is good. Her canthal tilt is good. Her eye aspect ratio is not. Her dominant middle third is good. Her jaw frontal angle, gotta check. High cheekbones, check. Mouth to nose, check. Total face height to width, so how long is her face compared to the width of it, is a check. And her eyebrow tilt is a check. So that is a 7.5 out of the 10. And these are the things that determine how masculine or feminized your face is. Her body fat factors, now I gave her a 7.5. And she does have kind of like a little bit of a chubby face in the front view. And she does have a little bit of cheek fat or fat around the cheek area from the front view. But from the side view, you don't really see that much fat from the cheek. And she does have a very aesthetic jaw. And you can see her ramus, her mandible, you can see everything else pretty clearly. So I gave her around a 7.5. But she is very lean overall. Her miscellaneous features, and she literally doesn't have any miscellaneous features. So nothing negative about her face, like no, forehead lines or eyebrow, like a lack of eyebrow density or anything like that. Like skin quality is perfect, everything is perfect. So I didn't take anything from miscellaneous features, so she got a 9.5, and 9.5 is the highest I'll usually go. So her eye separation ratio. So how separated is your pupils relative to your cheekbone distance? So pupil distance divided by the cheekbone distance, and hers is 45.3, and that is good, and that's also within the middle of the distribution. So she does have perfectly set eyes. Her facial third is all even, so this is perfect. Her canthal tilt is 7 degrees, perfect again. Anything higher than 6 will be within the ideal range. Her facial width to height ratio, so this determines how compact or elongated your facial features are within your face, all right? And this is all relative to your cheekbones or your width of your head, I guess you could say. And hers is at 1.93. Now this is at the lower end, but this is still compact enough, so she does pass this measurement. Her jaw frontal angle, so she does have a good jaw frontal angle, is wide enough. And this is kind of weird because she does have a steep mandible, because usually when people have a steep mandible, like I said again, I'm gonna show you guys later, they usually have a lower degree of a jaw angle. So for her to not have that is kind of surprising. cheekbone height settiness, so how high set is her cheekbones, and hers at 81%. Anything lower than this would be considered medium set, so yeah. Her total facial height width ratio is a tier 1, so this is perfect, and she does have a pretty small head, but not too small to where it will be outside of the ideal range for a female. So this is a perfectly ideal female head. So, and females tend to have more horizontal, their heads tend to be more horizontal than males. So females usually have more or wider heads, I guess you could say, than males. Males tend to have more longer heads overall. Her bigonial width, so how wide is her jaw, and hers at 85, so this is kind of like at the lower end of the ideal range, but this is still perfect, so she does have a wide jaw. That's probably one of the reasons why her jaw angle is perfect. Her chin to philtrum ratio is a tier 1 at 2.16, so ideally you want to have your philtrum to be at least 1 to 2 or 2 to 1 around there, or it can go all the way up to 2.5. So she is within that ideal range, and anything more than 2.5 would be outside of that, so you do not want that. But her chin is pretty small, but it's still pretty good relative to her philtrum. This is the neck width, so she does have a pretty wide neck for a female, so this is kind of going to be outside of the ideal range for a female. Females tend to have less wide necks than males. Her mouth to nose width ratio, so she does have a pretty wide nose, like nostril wise, but her mouth is even wider, so I can see why this will be within the ideal range. And yeah, her mid-face ratio, so it goes from the eye line all the way down to the upper lip, and that is going to be divided by the distance between the pupils. So the distance between the pupils divided by the eye line down to the upper lip, which is the mid face, and it should be at least 1 or 1 to 1, and she is between that at 1.06, so that's why she gets full points for that. So she does have good mid face, and females tend to have a more shorter compact mid face than men. Eyebrow settiness, so you want your eyebrows to be around mid to low set. Hers is high set, so she doesn't get full points for this. Her eye spacing, one eye test. Ideally, you want your eyes to be one eye's width apart. Hers is a little more than one eye width apart at 1.12, so she doesn't get full points for this as well. Her eye aspect ratio is a tier 4 at 3.8, so she does have very narrow eyes. Now, this is also outside of the ideal range for a man too, so anything too narrow than this is going to be uncanny and kind of like weird a little bit. Not weird, but like outside of the ideal range. And usually women tend to have rounder eyes, so the fact that she has narrow eyes is kind of, I guess you could say, unique. Her lower lip to upper lip ratio is a tier 2 at 1.2. Now she does have pretty small lips now, but she is Caucasian. Caucasian people tend to have small lips on average, but if her upper lip was a little bit smaller, then she probably would have been within that range. Now, the deviation from her ipsilateral aliar angle to her jaw frontal angle, the ipsilateral aliar angle goes from the subnasal all the way up to the outer edges of the eyes. And we all know what the jaw frontal angle is. Now, hers is at 0 degrees, so this is literally parallel. This is unique right here. Like, most people can't even, get a 0 degrees for this measurement, and this is perfect. So she does get full points for that. Her eyebrow tilt is 15 degrees. You want to have pretty tilted eyebrows for a female. Females tend to have more tilted eyebrows, so for hers to be 15 degrees, and this is within the ideal range, so this is perfect. Her bitemporal width, so how wide is her forehead relative to her cheeks. So this is pretty much forehead exposure. How much forehead exposure do you have relative to the width of your face? And hers is at 85%, and this is also going to be a tier 1, so that's perfect. Her lower third proportion should be around 33%, and it cannot deviate more than 3% away from 33%, which hers at 35. So anything more than 36% will be outside of the ideal range for the lower third proportions. Her ipsilateral aliar angle is 90 degrees. 90 degrees is perfect. Like I said again, this ipsilateral aliar angle matches her jaw frontal angle. and it is completely parallel, which is very unique, and most people cannot get that. So that is perfect. Her gonial angle, and like I said again, the front of her face was perfect. The side of her face got more flaws to it. Her gonial angle is outside of the ideal range at 133 degrees. Anything outside of 128 degrees is going to be outside of the ideal range for a female. And females tend to have less sharper jaws, so that's why uh, their ideals is a little bit higher than a guy's ideal. Usually guys or men's ideal range stops at 123 degrees for the gonial angle, while females get at least like a 5-degree increase for their gonial angle because they have less sharper jaws, like I said before. Her nasofrontal angle, so this angle identifies how protrusive her brow region is, and goes from the nasal bridge all the way to the brow region, and hers is at 139 degrees. This is a tier 2. This is slightly outside of the ideal range, so, and it's only by 2 degrees, so this is not too big of a flaw or anything like that. So yeah. Her mandibular plane angle, so like I said again, her mandible is downswung, so that's why I was kind of wondering why her jaw frontal angle was perfect. But I think that's probably because of a few other things too, because she does have a smaller head and a smaller chin, so maybe that's why her jaw frontal angle was perfect anyway. But either way, 30 degrees is still within the normal range, but it's definitely outside of the ideal range. Anything more than 22 degrees is going to be a little bit too downswung, and it's not going to produce that sharp jaw that you would want. And preferably you want your mandible to be at least or close to parallel to the ground. Her ramus to mandible ratio is slightly outside of the ideal range, but this is not a flaw by any means necessary. This is near to ideal at 38 degrees. If she was at 39, I would have gave her full points for this, but she still has a lot of jaw body right here. And most women don't really have that much jaw body compared to men on the average, but still, preferably you do want to have a jaw body. Either way it goes. Facial convexity from the glabella. So her facial convexity is rounded, and we're gonna see why it's rounded. But hers is at 164 degrees, and ideally you want 168. So she's only 4 degrees away. So this is not too bad of a fall, and this is still within the normal range because a lot of people have rounded facial convexities. It's not only just one race of people or one gender of people. No, like different people have different facial structures. Her submental curvical angle, so this indicates if you have a high hyoid, so that is the neck area, the bone within the neck area. If it protrudes too much, so it's on the top region of the neck area. If you have a high hyoid, the bone protrudes, which is going to create an obtuse angle. Or if you have a lot of submental fat underneath the chin and the jaw, is going to also create a obtuse angle. So hers is right angle or close to a right angle, and that is ideal. So you want it to be around the 95 degrees or close to it. And as you can see, she is very close to that. So this is perfect. Her nasofacial angle is a tier 2 at 39 degrees. Now we're gonna see why again. I'm not gonna say it, but I already said it before. But we're gonna see why her nasofacial angle is not ideal. And this does not also take into effect her facial convexity. It's only taken into effect her nose measurement and her chin measurement. So this indicates whether her chin and her nose have a good relationship to her face. Her nasolabial angle, so this measurement tells or indicates how upturned or downswung her nose is, and her nose is upturned, and this is feminine. Females tend to have more upturned noses than men, so this is perfect. Her orbital vector is slightly positive. It's not completely positive, but it's ever so slightly positive. So you do want your orbital rims to go past your eyes to create that illusion that your eyes are deep set within your skull. So that is good. Her total facial convexity is a tier 1 at 138. But a facial convexity like this is at the lower end. And another thing is facial convexity also, or the total facial convexity also takes into account her nasal protrusion, but her nasal protrusion protrudes a little bit more, so it kind of balances it out, but it's still at the lower end at 38 degrees. And even though her facial convexity overall is rounded, her nasal protrusion kind of saves her in this measurement, so this one does pass. Her mental labial angle is at 134 degrees and is at a tier 3, still within the normal range, but females tend to have more of a protrusive chin, and if her chin was more protrusive, this probably would have been within the ideal range, so she does miss out on that. Her facial convexity from the nasion, so this is the facial convexity, so instead of going to the glabella, it goes to the nasion, so that is at the nasal bridge, and hers is at 161 degrees, which is a tier 2, so that's slightly less than the ideal range, or what is considered to be ideal. But this doesn't, detract too many points from her overall assessment, so it's not too bad. Her nasal projection, so how projected is her nose is, so is at the very lower end of it. Anything less than this is going to be outside of the range of the idealness, but her nose is projected and is also pretty much what it is the base of the nose is going to be divided by the nasal bridge. So whatever the base is, that is going to be divided by the nasal bridge, and it should be at least 55% or higher. And men tend to have more of a projected nose as well. Now, the nasal width to height projection, all right? So for a guy, this would be a long, or I guess you could say a lengthy nose, but for a female, this wouldn't be considered a lengthy nose or long enough nose. The reason why is because females tend to have less of a nose width. So if you have less of a nose width, that means that the range is going to be even greater. So instead of 0.62 to 0.88 is going to be around 0.62 to 0.84 because of the nose width. So yeah, but this is slightly outside of that range. Her rictus E-line, so these are all the lip measurements. Ursal line, S line, H line, and the E line. So she did pass some of these measurements. Now her bottom lip isn't as protrusive as it needs to be. It's very close, but if her bottom lip was a little bit protrusive, then she probably would have passed this measurement. Her H line, so it goes from the tip of the upper lip down to the chin, and your bottom lip should touch, which her bottom lip does touch. Her S line is also tier 1, so it goes from the middle of the nose down to the chin, and both lips are touched, which it does. And the bursal line, like I said again, the bottom lip isn't as protrusive enough. If it protrudes just a little bit more, she would have had a tier 1 for this one, so it's very close. And it goes from the subnasal down to the chin. So her nasal mental angle is a tier 2 at 122. So this is very close to the ideal. And the ideal starts at 125. Now, this also takes into account your facial convexity, but the reason why we have this measurement is because it shows the relationship between the chin and the nose. But like I said again, since it also takes your facial convexity into account, and like I said, her facial convexity is round, is going to be within the lower end, and hers is outside of the ideal range for that reason. Her gonium to mouth relationship, so the gonium bone is where the two vectors meet, and you want that bone to be below your mouth line. But for hers meets at the mouth line. So let me just put it right here. So this is the gonium bone, and you want it to be below this mouth line, but hers line up at the mouth line. So this is not technically a flaw, but this is not the most aesthetically pleasing gonium that you want. So her jaw isn't, or her ramus isn't long enough for her face. But if her ramus was just a tad bit longer, this would have been perfect, but it's very, very close. Her recession relative to the Frankfurt plane angle, so she is very, and the line is perpendicular to the Frankfurt plane angle. So the Frankfurt plane angle is a line that you see across her face, and the line that's going up vertically is that line that I'm talking about that goes perpendicular to that Frankfurt plane angle. And that line that's perpendicular to the Frankfurt plane angle should preferably, let me put it right here, we pass the nasion, which is this point right here, and also past the glabella, which is your brow region. Preferably you want it to be past your glabella or line up to your glabella. But either way, if it passes the nasion, which will be considered the ideal, at least that will be considered a very protrusive mandible, or protrusive enough for your face, and that would be within the ideal range. But for her, since her chin lines up literally almost close to her eyes, this will be considered a very recessed jaw. So she does have a very recessed jaw, and also her chin isn't protrusive enough as well. So those two things will help. Her brow ridge inclination is a 12 degrees, so she does have a pretty sloped forehead, but not too sloped back. And this is perfect for a female face. And yeah, and she does have a little bit of a brow bossing. Now, brow bossing is usually for men. This is like almost an exclusive feature for men, but the fact that she has it is kind of weird, I guess you could say. So I don't know if she's taking any type of steroids or anything, since she's a bodybuilder, but usually like men usually have brow bossings around their brow region, but I don't know. Sometimes other people might have it, so yeah. And her nasal tip, so this is the last measurement of the 44 measurements that I usually do, and the nasal tip is 124 degrees, and this is perfect nasal tip angle. So she doesn't have a bulbous of a nasal tip or anything like that, and this is perfect. And it's not too pointy too, it's within the middle. And women tend to have more of a upturned nose, or an upturned nasal tip, I should say. So their angles can be a little bit more higher. And yeah. And let me show you guys two more measurements that would not count. So the lower lip to submental plane would not count, but this is another measurement that you can take to assess the submental area and also the lip to chin area as well. And hers is at 105, so this is a good angle. And usually you want that angle to be within the 90 to 110 degrees, and hers is between that, so this is perfect. And her inferior third of her face / lower third of the facial proportions, so don't get this mixed up with the lower third proportions. This is a little bit different, but it's another way to assess if you have a perfect lower third proportions. And what it is you divide the top portion, so from the subnasal down to the lip line, you divide that to the lip line all the way down to the chin or the menton, and it should be between 0.43 to 0.53. And if it's outside of that range, that kind of indicates that you don't have a good relationship between your lower third proportions. But it's just another way to assess whether your lower third proportions is good. Now, I will say this: if you want me to assess your face, make sure to email me or DM me. I will have it down in the description. And when you DM me, I will message you and I will give you the instructions on what to do. And within 24 to 48 hours, within 24 to 48 hours, you should be able to get your rating. And from there, yeah, that's pretty much it to it, depending on how busy I am. But it should be within 24 hours. So yeah, this is pretty much it for this female bodybuilder. And she is I believe it was a 7.6, which is very rare. And yeah, I'm out, guys. Peace.